Fine. Have you had your first shot yet?
Yes, and my second one is a week from tomorrow.
Good for
Where'd you get
you.
it?
I'm sorry?
Where'd you get it?
Where did I get it?
Yeah.
I just was standing on the street corner one day and
Oh, come on. Which
this
one did you get?
guy came along with a little needle.
And he said, I volunteer.
You don't want to tell us. Which one did you get? The Moderna or the?
Yeah, the Moderna.
You did.
Yeah.
And it didn't bother you.
Well, not yet. I have been told that the second one can
No.
have a bigger effect.
Us people who are more mature don't have the same reaction as people that are still developing.
Okay, so Ronnie, I talked to somebody who was, in our age bracket.
Yeah.
I just so the rest of you know, Ronnie and I are in the same age bracket,
Absolutely.
and they had a very bad reaction to the second.
Really?
Not the first one, but the second one.
Yeah, my son only affects the younger. I mean, people that are younger. That everyone who's quote past a certain age seems to handle it quite well. Well, I don't care. I'm getting it. Like my son said, being sick for a day, day and a half versus being dead. I'll take being sick for a day, day and a half.
Yeah, there you go. Hey,
So
Daniel.
He's muted.
Well, I see, but I can tell hello. Sam? Sam is silent, Sam.
Sam said that his Zoom had a virus and he was having difficulty signing in. So I think Sam is with us, but he communicates via the chat.
Okay. All right. I bear no prejudice against partial participants. So I want to start out tonight before we get into text. And I see that Ashley has just handed out the text, but before you look at it, I want to ask a question. What is it that you think is most likely to help a person have religious faith? I mean, a mature, lasting religious faith. What do you think are the important ingredients or the most important ingredient that goes into that? Yeah, Ann.
One possibility is that he grew up in a family where they enjoyed observance, and he just picked it up as something as part of a happy part of life.
That's what I was going to say.
Okay. Although having a comfort level with religious observance, regardless of what religion you're talking about, it's not the same as actually having faith. They may be related, but it's not exactly the same thing.
What do you think, Jerry? Faith.
Danny?
Yes.
When you say have faith, I'm reading that as a belief in a personal God of some sort, be it corporate or incorporate.
Yeah.
Might it also mean to think that this deity is somehow good?
Well, I would hope that people who believe in God believe that God ultimately is good.
Well,
I don't know too many people who say, I believe in an evil God.
No, but Isaiah says that Hashem, he quotes Hashem as saying, I create good and evil.
Yes,
right.
Yes. To be the creator of all things is one thing. To be evil in and of itself, that's something else. Del?
I would say the person.
Hold on, Ronnie.
Yes.
I would say the person has to have had a reasonable number of experiences with things that they can't explain by anything other than a deity, and So that's the basis of their faith.
So you've had
Mhm.
personal miracles.
No.
Or
Yeah.
could
Oh,
be, right? Maybe, some people, they just, they experience certain things that just make it impossible for them not to believe.
okay.
Yeah, Ronnie.
Okay, I'm going to comment on what Dell said, then I've got a question. If you walk outside and you look at nature, it's hard to believe that it's random. It's so perfect. There has to be something behind creation, the patterns in creation, just in nature. It has to be from someone. But I do have another question. That's my feeling. You go outside in nature and everything is just what it needs to be.
Everything is a miracle. Right.
Everything is a miracle.
Yeah.
Go
I-
ahead, Ronnie.
I just found out today that on the sixth day of creation, between dusk and night, that 10 things were created. 10 things were created.
Right.
And
So let me just interrupt just to say that is a rabbinic teaching. For those of you who are saying to yourselves, well, I sure didn't hear about that one.
Right.
Didn't read that in Genesis.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's where the demons, where evil was created. So it was one of the 10 things.
Which doesn't really explain why they were created or why they were created at the last moment. God needed to make things more interesting.
I think
I don't know.
to test man, to test man.
That's what woman is for.
Uh-oh.
I agree.
But I just
You're a
learned,
I
man.
couldn't. You threw it into my lap, right? I had to say that.
I never heard of it. Of these 10 things that were created at the very, very, very end of creation.
Where did
Uh-huh.
you find out?
It's in Pirkei Avot, actually.
I have a study partner who's very orthodox, and we study every Thursday together. And it came up today in what we were learning. And I was like, and she named, well, actually 12 things, so you can pick and choose.
Right. There are two that some say that. Yeah. Let me just fill everybody in, because it is a kind of an interesting teaching. Doesn't necessarily bear on my original question, but I'm happy to.
But when you
Okay.
brought up
So
demons,
this is chapter 5, Mishnah number 8 in Pirkei Avot.
okay,
And it says 10 things were created Erev Shabbat at twilight, right? So that is right on the bubble before Shabbat begins,
right,
before the end of creation.
right.
So one of them is the mouth of the earth.
Correct. That's what swallowed, what's his name?
Korach.
Korach.
Yeah.
Thank you.
The mouth of the well.
Right. That's the well that existed in Sinai.
Is it Miriam's well?
Miriam's well. No,
Miriam's well. Yes.
Miriam's well. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Number 3, the speech of the ass.
Correct.
Right. That's Korach again. Right.
What's his name?
That's
What's
Balak.
No, that's Balaam. Sorry.
Balaam?
Yes,
Yeah.
Balaam's. Yeah.
Talking.
Proving once again that there is such a thing as a talking ass.
Yes.
The rainbow.
Right.
Right? In other words, it's not that the rainbow shone at that moment, but the means for it was created in advance so that at the time, after the flood, the rainbow would be available.
Mhm.
Oh, wait a
The
minute.
manna.
There was no rainbow before that?
Apparently not. But well, I mean, maybe there was, but that we just don't hear about it in the Torah. But the means for it is created at the end of creation. The manna,
Correct.
right? The rod,
Correct. Aaron's rod.
yes. The shamir, right? Did you learn about that one, Ronnie?
Yes,
The
the
worm.
worm that created the hole so they didn't have to use nails to build the Beit HaMikdash.
Yeah, so the worm it was this magical little worm, and it could eat through the hardest stone.
Right.
Yeah. The script.
Oh,
Now,
that.
you know what that is?
No.
So Moses goes up to Sinai and God hands him these 2 tablets, right?
Right.
And the tablets, the letters are cut out on both sides.
Mhm.
What,
Right.
what do you mean cut out on both sides?
The letter Samach would fall out.
Yeah, it's not like a monument. You go to the cemetery and you see a monument,
Correct.
and it's only on one side that it's
Correct.
carved. In the original tablets, right? The tablets given to Moses, the carving was all the way through.
Would that be the Aleph Bet? Because that's what I learned.
Well, yeah.
Okay.
And by the way, some letters have, a little piece inside them. Like, think of the letter Samach,
Okay.
right? So the Samach it's almost circular, right?
Correct.
So normally you would say, well, if it was cut all the way through, that inside piece would be, it would disappear. It would fall out from the tablets.
Gotcha.
Doesn't fall out. That's what the rabbi said. Right?
Okay. So we're up to
Next,
8.
the writing instrument, right? Because, you got to have a writing instrument to make those tablets in the first place.
That wasn't one I learned. Okay.
Yeah, that's number 9. Number 10, the tablets themselves, right?
Mm,
And then it says
First.
others add. Oh,
Yes.
there's more. Oh, there's more
Yes.
than 2 added, right? So others add the demons.
the demons, the ram.
Right. Obviously, rabbis also had teenagers. So
The ram that was provided for Abraham.
right, that ram didn't just show up, it had to be created.
Correct. And also I learned the clothing for Adam.
Okay, that's not in the list in Pirkei Avot, but
Okay.
okay. Yeah, that'd be good. I mean, where did God have that clothing from?
Yes.
Okay. The burial place for Moses.
Yes, that was the other one, another one, yes.
Right? Because God obviously prepared that from
Yes, that was one Hetty told me.
the beginning. And then the last one, some add the tongs made with tongs. Okay, I think this proves that the rabbis had a sense of humor, right? Because in ancient times, how did you make tongs? Well, you needed tongs in order to make tongs. So who made the first set of tongs? Answer, God.
I also, what she told me was the, what do you call it? The cloud, the cloud of the presence of God, the cloud. What do you call it?
The Ananei Kavod, the clouds of glory.
Clouds of glory. Yes.
Yes. After all, the Israelites had those clouds of glory that followed them through the wilderness. Right? They didn't just magically appear and stay. They were prepared for from the beginning. So at any rate, those are things that also have some miraculous quality.
Absolutely.
But what about the snake? Because if he created the donkey, why didn't he create the snake at the same time?
Well, the snake, I guess, was created with all the other creatures.
Right. And it wasn't a snake, it was a serpent.
But he was a talking snake.
Yes.
But
Back
did
then, you know, there were a lot of odd things.
anyway, I learned that today, that there was all these add-ons at the,
Yes.
at
So
the-
you know, but your original point, which is the important point I want to bring back here, is that if you've experienced certain miracles, even if other people don't treat them as miracles, but you see them as miracles, that's something that can bring people to faith.
Correct.
Because, you know, how do you explain those miracles? Okay. Anybody else have a thought on this question? Yeah, Daniel. I almost forgot that you'd raised your hand before. Sorry.
It's all right. Well, I'm just going to take a little twist here. I don't think that there are any personality traits, intellectual traits, character traits, moral traits, ethical traits of anybody that's correlated with a belief in God. And twisting that around, it's almost statistically insignificant. There are no, you cannot look at someone's being and say, well, that person is more likely to believe in God than this other person. There's no correlations.
Mhm.
I'm smiling when I say that.
Well, I think that
What is one, I guess, is what I'm turning the question around. You can
Well,
name one, and I can name some really smart people, some stupid people, some emotionally disturbed people, and some perfectly balanced people. I can name all kinds of people that I know.
well, you've been to
And
Shul.
what?
You've been to Shul.
There's no correlation. I mean, some of the stupid people believe in God, and some of the bright people believe in God, and vice versa. I mean, there's no rhyme or reason to it. I have a good friend of mine who will remain unnamed, who said that she felt like very alone because she didn't get that part of the brain that believes in God. It's not that she disbelieves it or believes it, it's just not there. And I think that's probably one of the most wise things I've heard. Some people innately have a need, if you will, to believe in God, or a desire or a want, or they get something out of it. Some of us don't. I mean, it's just not part of our brain, our point of view.
Well, from what I have read, which is not a lot, of the psychological research on this subject, I think it tends to support what you are saying.
You're kidding me, really? Because it was just a wild guess on my part. I didn't.
Now, I have to tell you from what I'm going to show you tonight, the rabbis did not believe that. They believed that there were certain things that would bring about faith, but they might not work forever.
I'm looking forward to hearing them.
Well, good.
did you say work forever?
I'm sorry?
Did you say work forever or for everyone?
They might not work forever, and they might not work for they might work for everyone, but they might not, you know. Yeah. So here's the verse from this week's Sedra. Right? This is right after the Israelites crossed the sea, and before you have the song at the sea. And one of these years, I'll actually do a class about that. But here's the verse. When Israel saw the wondrous power which the Lord had wielded against the Egyptians, the people revered the Lord. They had faith in the Lord and in his servant Moses. Right? So it says, you know, they saw the power and they said, I'm in. I believe. Right? That's what it looks like. It may not be that simple, but that's what the verse says. They saw the power and they believed. So let's take a look at this midrashic text about this. All right. So the Mechilta to Rabbi Shimon says the verse seems redundant. If Israel believed in Moses, they certainly trusted. God was fighting their battle for them. Rather, it teaches that whenever one believes in the mission of a prophet of Israel, that individual necessarily accepts the existence of the Creator. Conversely, back in Numbers, where the people spoke against God and against Moses, again, the text teaches that whenever one challenges the authority of God's representatives, it is as if he has criticized his Creator. Now, leaving aside the second part, the first part seems to say that if you believe in the prophet, you're going to believe in the Father. You're going to believe in the source of the prophecy.
Why?
Why? Because
you can't believe that prophet's just really a good leader and smart and charismatic, and that's
you got to believe it's coming from somewhere.
Maybe from another planet.
Because, Daniel, the best and the brightest weren't always right. The most charismatic leaders can also be the most failed leaders. Right? So, but the idea is if you believe in the prophet, then you believe in the one who sent him. Yes, Dale.
The prophet is saying, I'm bringing you this message from the deity. And so if you're going to believe in the prophet, well, you got to believe he's telling you the truth about this deity.
Yes.
Actually, Del, I get that. That makes sense to me. If the definition of a prophet is somebody who's delivering a message from God, then it makes logical sense that if you believe in the prophet, you believe in God.
Yeah.
I got it.
Now, here's the problem. What if the prophet is a false prophet?
He lied?
Yeah.
Well,
Not believing the prophet doesn't mean that the deity doesn't exist.
Right. Right. God can still exist even if the prophet is a false prophet.
Correct.
Which is a good thing.
Yes.
Deuteronomy
There sure are.
13.
There is no shortage of false prophets out there. Yes, Ann?
If they tell you to worship other gods, they're definitely false prophets. Deuteronomy 13.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, Jerry?
Yes. I'm over here in the corner, Jerry.
Well, we'll come out of the corner, Jerry.
Move over.
I'm trying to move over. We're sharing
Okay.
the screen.
So we have the story of Elijah and the big challenge between him and
The prophets of Baal. Yes.
Right? Okay. So they were kind of like in a gunfight, this side and this side, and he says, you can't you can't be on both sides of the doorway and all that. And
right.
So in that situation, the only way that you could believe that there was a real prophet is when he did something, right? He had the fire come down and not take care of the people and all that.
Yes.
That would kind of make you feel like, the guy knows what he's doing, and he's not a magician, right? Because remember that Pharaoh had all his advisors, and they were doing stuff too.
Yes. Interestingly, there's a lot of discussion in the tradition. It's actually one of the things we're going to be touching on in my mysticism class on Sunday, which is, is the prophet also a wonder worker? And sometimes, at least in the Bible, the prophet is a wonder worker. Book of Kings talks about Isaiah. We all know about Elijah. We know about Elisha, Elijah's disciple. Some prophets just seem to be, bringing the word from God. But others, they definitely get some extra power. And Moses falls into that category, obviously.
Okay, well, how about Balaam was supposed to be the greatest prophet for the non-Jews, but he still told the people, I get my power from God,
Yeah.
I won't do certain things.
Right.
So
Okay.
it seems to me that's kind of believable too, right? And he's the one who got the donkey to talk to him.
Yeah. But he seems to come from the dark side too, right? Going to curse God's people. That's.
Well, he wouldn't do it, remember? That's why we have those places.
He would have liked to. He took money for it.
Well, yeah, everybody takes some money here.
Yeah, but for what purpose?
Well, but because he took the money because eventually he came up with a way to get at the Jews, right?
It's not, if I were King Balak who hired him in the first place, I would have wanted my money back.
Yeah. Well, maybe he had a lot of money, he didn't care.
No, he complained. He
Listen,
wanted his money back.
what you pay for, you want to get.
Right. But
so moving back to our handout, let's take a look at this piece from Hirsch. Okay. So he says, reverence and belief represent the two. And by the way, when I say awe/reverence, it's the same word in Hebrew. It's the word yirah, right? Like yirat shamayim. What is yirat? Shamayim means heaven. Yirat shamayim, sometimes it's translated as fear of heaven, sometimes as reverence for heaven, sometimes as awe of heaven. But it's not really any one of those, it's all of those. Yirah is like one of the champion words in Hebrew in terms of different connotations. So, to translate it as fear of God, it's just way too simple. So here it is. Reverence and belief represent the two most fundamental conditions of faith, which are present in the heart of every Jew who stands before God. There is only one being in the world whom we must simultaneously revere and trust, and that is God, who is singular and unique. So what's he saying? Is this two conditions, reverence and trust. God's attribute of love is equal to his dimension of righteousness, his attribute of justice matched by his attribute of compassion. There are no limits to the might of God's strength when he exercises his attribute of mercy or executes divine justice. The salvation that Israel witnessed at the sea was an eternal one, unparalleled in its greatness. For the miracles at the sea incorporated three of God's dimensions: his readiness to judge humanity so that all people should fear him forever, his unbounded compassion such that Israel might faithfully anticipate his assistance at all times, and his unlimited power such that his creations will submit freely to his commandments. Okay? But right there, so that fleshes out a little bit what Hirsch is talking about. But right at the beginning, he tells you the conditions of faith are yirah, meaning whatever piece of that you want to take, and he says trust. Right? And if you look back at the verse that we started with, the word he'emin By the way, you know, Amin includes the same letters as the word Amen. Right? So Amen is like saying, I believe. Right? So Amin can mean had faith, or can also mean trust in. Okay? So maybe one condition is trust. Now, trust usually has to be earned, but not always. Sometimes you just trust somebody, right? Especially if you're a kid. Who do you trust?
Your parents.
Until proven otherwise, right? Right? You trust them because they take care of you, they feed you, they take you to the doctor to get your shot. And when mom says it's going to hurt a little bit, you trust that, but she says, we got to do this. And you trust, and usually most of our kids, we were lucky they did it anyway. So, they did it. That's trust. Right?
It's going to hurt a little bit is the first time you learn not to trust mom.
Well, but then you get a lollipop and you forget how much it hurt. Right? Hopefully.
Well, my mom was a nurse and she gave me shots as a kid. And my response was, Mom, you hurt me.
Yeah. Yeah. And so she said, shut up and have a lollipop, Del. Okay. Next. This is from your friend, Ann, our friend, Richard Elliott Friedman.
Oh,
Contemporary Bible scholar. So, and he's talking about this word, Amin, right? He says it doesn't have the meaning here it has in later religious concepts, does not function in the sense of believing that a God exists. This notion of belief in does not occur in biblical Hebrew, nor in other ancient Near Eastern languages. In pagan religion, the gods are not a matter of belief, but of knowledge. So he says, for the Bible, you don't, the only way you have faith is So in the conception of God in Exodus, God becomes known. God's existence and power are a matter of knowledge, not belief. When one has seen 10 plagues and a sea split, and has a column of cloud and fire visible at all times, one does not ask, do you believe in God? Right? Makes sense. Right? It's not belief in, but belief that. Right? Meaning that if God says he will do something, one can trust he will do it. Right? So that's a very helpful distinction, I think. Belief in and belief that, which we're going to see more about here because Richard Friedman didn't invent that. I'm not sure that it was original to Louis Jacobs, but we're going to take a look at what the 20th century theologian Louis Jacobs had to say about it. Okay? So, starts saying, he says, a belief in proposition always presupposes a belief that proposition. Belief in affirms that it exists. Belief that shows trust and confidence. I cannot believe in the trustworthiness of my friend, for instance, unless I first believe that he and his trustworthiness are real and have been united in the past. My belief in him implies that he will be equally reliable in the future. Belief that, on the other hand, need not involve any kind of belief in. Hamlet's belief that he had seen his father's ghost was not in itself sufficient ground for trusting the ghost's tragic tale and advice. Right? So even if you believe in ghosts, don't necessarily believe what they tell you. Right? Which is a really good point. Now he says belief that is chiefly a matter of the intellect. The man who believes in ghosts does so because the arguments for their existence convince him. Even if that's not based on a careful weighing of the evidence, or it's the result of a hunch, his mind is satisfied that the hunch is correct. Emotional factors are not, of course, absent. He may wish to believe in ghosts. The conviction that there are ghosts may, for some reason, be emotionally more satisfying than the conviction that they do not. But the affirmation is more mental than emotional or moral. Okay? On the other hand, belief in is primarily a matter of the moral will. The man who believes in his friend or in himself does so not so much because he has weighed dispassionately all the evidence for trustworthiness, but because it seems right to him to place his trust in that which is worthy of his trust as he sees it. Moreover, the very attitude of trust in one's friend may itself summon forth a response on the part of the friend and so be responsible for the vindication of trust. Belief that involves the appropriation of a truth. Belief in involves the determination to act on the truth one has seen. It follows that there can be no command to believe that, but belief in can be commanded. We can meaningfully be ordered to be loyal to the truth we have seen, just as we can be commanded to obey any other moral imperative. Okay? So, what do we come out with from this?
A set of values,
I'm sorry?
certain values that God has recommended to us.
Yes. And therefore, God commands those values to us, and that makes sense to us. That's what you're saying, Ann?
Yes,
Okay.
and
Just-
some of them are ethical and some of them are called ritual nowadays, and that's not the way they were just,
Yeah,
they weren't divvied up like that to start with.
right. Yeah, they didn't have a word for ritual back then, I don't think.
And they didn't have a way of saying that those ones didn't count.
Yeah, yeah. So, this brings me back to our original question, which is, what are the elements that would bring a person to have faith in God? Let's say belief in, belief that God exists. Okay? So I'm going to throw out one that wasn't mentioned. Oh, Jerry, you had something you wanted to say.
Okay, so we go back to something here, when the children of Israel left Egypt, they saw all these miracles, everything happen, right?
Right.
So to me, and according to tradition, everybody who was alive and who wasn't alive saw that. So there's some kind of an inborn spark in you that says that is absolutely true, correct?
Well, yeah, that's the rabbinic teaching is that the souls of all Israelites, past, present, and future, were present at Sinai.
Correct.
I assume that's what you're referring to.
Okay, so the next step was, when Moses was going to go, he got to the Red Sea and he started praying. And what did God tell him? Stop praying and do something, right?
Right?
And how come he had to have Nachshon ben Avidav jump in the water instead of him? So still we got
Yeah, maybe Moses wasn't much of a swimmer. I don't know. But
no,
Nachshon, yeah, and again, this is a midrash, and Nachshon, who was head of one of the tribes, just sort of dove in. He went into the water, and the water rolled back.
right.
Does this show that Moses did not have faith?
No,
Well, maybe he just didn't have the right application of faith. I mean, he's praying to God. He says, God, you brought us here. You get us through this. God says, well, you got to go forward.
so I mean, still all those things, if you experienced that, you would believe there was a God, right?
I would.
I think if I had been there, I don't mean my soul. I mean, my flesh and blood body. If I'd seen it with my own current eyes, I'm sure my faith would be rock solid.
Okay,
Yeah, I can have a doubt every now and then today.
but see
God,
that,
if I'd seen that would take care of all the doubts.
no, but even after all that, the Jews kind of lost their faith,
Aha.
The golden
Yes, because if
calf,
you skip
everything.
ahead to the next, segment in our Parsha, in the same Parsha, what happens?
The golden calf.
No. I mean, that's later on. Yes, that's problematic too, of course. But I'm just looking like, at the next day after they've crossed the sea.
They started complaining there was no food, there was no water.
Especially water.
Yeah, well, I like water now and then.
And you took us out of Egypt to die in the desert.
Right.
Right. So all of this kind of brings me to one other element that I think is important for faith. And it can take different forms, but I think that you don't have religious faith without some sense of stability. You have to believe that certain things will be dependable. And I mean, more than just the sun coming up in the morning. Because even the people who one day believed, because God brought them across the sea, when instability set in again in the desert, that faith proved to be very short-lived.
Right.
So now, being at the sea or being at Sinai, that's ultimate stability. But instability can still happen and attack that. And that's why I think faith is never a permanent given. Yes, Dale.
Well, at the sea and then later at Sinai, it's almost like there are no atheists in foxholes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
They had no long-term faith.
Right.
Right. Yeah, Ronnie?
I was going to actually say what Dell said, because no matter how many miracles God performed, the parting of the Red Sea, the 10 plagues, the manna, the water, there was still always doubt with the Israelites. always, there was always the question of, it was always the adult. They never see, and maybe that's why that generation was forced to not enter Eretz Israel, because it was always, no matter how many miracles God performed, it was never enough.
Right. And
Okay.
here's the thing about that generation. That was a generation that had known nothing else except slavery. Slavery is the ultimate instability.
Right.
You have nothing of your own. There, you have no time that is just for you. You are at the mercy of the one or the ones who own you.
Okay.
Right? And so how can you have faith?
Okay. So
Because all these miracles that were performed, at the Red Sea.
Yes,
The
but if
take-
your mentality is essentially slave mentality, then that built-in instability will undermine the faith even from the crossing of the sea or
Wow.
Sinai.
okay, Rabbi.
Yes, Jerry.
There was another factor. Remember, when all these people left, they took along Egyptians with them. So we don't know who were the Egyptian, who were just going along for the ride.
Right, the Erev Rav,
Right.
mixed multitude.
So that mixed multitude may have influenced some of their thinking too, right?
Yes, the Erev Rav tends to be blamed for a lot of stuff.
Well, I would think that would be something that if they went along, they figured there's something in it for them, right?
Uh-huh.
But, as they got to talking with the Jews, they may have influenced their thinking. But maybe there's a God, maybe there's not a God, maybe
Right.
maybe we brought our idols with us. There's 1,000 stories that could influence the Jews.
No, if you've seen a miracle like the parting of the Red Sea, how can you doubt?
I see.
How can you doubt?
Well, apparently you can, at least the following day.
The Parsha goes on, but I don't understand intellectually, how can you doubt when you see the sea part and the Egyptians drowned in the sea? I
Because
don't.
you are so fundamentally unable to rely on anything that even the miracle you saw yesterday counts for less than your thirst today.
Okay, so doesn't the tradition say don't rely on miracles?
Yes, it does.
Well,
The rabbis understood that, in their time, they didn't experience those kinds of miracles. And so they said, don't plan on that. Don't wait for miracles. Don't expect miracles. Because in our time, you're not so likely to get them. However, many of the people to whom the rabbis were talking had that fundamental stability, and that helped them to go through.
But they lived in a time of great instability. They had
Well,
no instability.
But not compared to the slave generation.
I mean, how many miracles do you need to see before you comprehend there is a greater power?
Well, it depends,
42.
That's the answer to everything, isn't it? That's why it's 42. I think that if you are fundamentally a stable person, one would be enough.
That's what I would think.
but see, there's another factor. I don't know. This is my own philosophy. we talk about, God created the world and he made all these laws, the sun comes up and all that. And then what we see is, here comes the hurricane, here comes the earthquake. Everybody's in the same boat. There's no distinction between the good and the bad. The only difference is if God says you're worthy, I will create my own personal miracle to help you. But it doesn't happen very often.
Yeah,
Well-
that's when the sages said very well that you shouldn't depend on miracles.
Yeah.
But I'm saying that to me is my philosophy about miracles. You have to be worthy for him to want to do it for you.
Well,
Or-
Jerry, interestingly, there is a rabbinic teaching that says just the opposite. So
Okay.
here's the miracle that happened, okay? Man and a woman marry, and they conceive a child. The child is born and the mother dies in childbirth. And so there's nobody to nurse the child. And the man prays and he grows breasts and nurses the child. And the rabbi, and one rabbi says, wow, that person must have been extremely worthy. That God answered his prayer. And another rabbi says, oh, how unworthy that person was, that God had to perform a miracle for him.
I know. So
Just the opposite of what you think.
Yeah, I know. But that happens.
I'm not saying that that's the final word on the matter. I'm just.
It
Yeah.
wasn't any old miracle. It was a miracle that made him female-like.
Yes, it was.
That was a bad thing.
Well, miracles can have a downside. Oh, I don't know. Maybe that wasn't such a bad downside. Now, he's in touch with his femininity. That's, we can all appreciate that today more than the rabbis did, hundreds of years ago. So let me go back. Yes, Del. I can't hear you, Del. That's because you've muted.
I would say that the number of miracles it takes to make somebody believe depends upon the person and the magnitude of the miracles.
Well, yeah, and maybe the stability within that person for them to hold on to that and depend on that and rest their faith on that for the rest of their life. So let me go to the last piece here. And this is yet another miracle that I actually got to the very end of whatever I had prepared. Because you know that doesn't usually happen. But this is a great teaching from the Kotzker Rebbe, who said throughout the period of the 10 plagues, there were Jews who had doubts, who feared that everything was pure coincidence. However, when they reached the stage of the people feared the Lord, right, or revered the Lord, or whatever, they got across the sea, and then they finally realized God's greatness. All knew that everything was from God. A single spark of yirat shamayim, fear of heaven, is equivalent to all the plagues. In other words, it's that spark of yirat shamayim, which all of us may get. We may get it from different places and different experiences. Some of you may get it from the kind of miracles Ronnie started talking about back at the beginning, right? Which, many people would say, well, that's just natural life, right? And yet, the fact that natural life exists is also a miracle, by any definition I can think of. Right? but a spark of Yirat Shamayim, however you get it, that'll do the trick. If only we knew how to bottle that spark, we'd have to work a lot less harder to educate Jewish children, to educate Jewish adults, to instill a certain amount of faith. Yirat Shamayim. The Gutzker says that's what it is. So I could do another hour on Yirat Shamayim, but
Rabbi,
yes.
why would you have a fear of heaven?
Okay, so again, let me remind you, that's the word I talked about before, Yirat Shamayim. It's translated here as fear of heaven. And, for the Kutzker, maybe that was valid, but what it really means is reverence for heaven, awe of heaven,
Okay,
as
that's
well as
fear of
fear
heaven.
of heaven. But
Okay.
it's not, in the Hebrew term, it's not like you can separate all those qualities. They're all combined in the word yira.
Okay, because I think that heaven would be an aspiration most of us would want to attain.
Yeah, but we have the other concept, that if I do such and such, or I violate a mitzvah, the God is going to strike me down and kill me right there on the spot. It doesn't happen, right? Right
Yeah,
then.
and so what happens to that kind of faith?
Well, it may come later. You don't know what day it's going to show up.
Yeah, see, I find it very interesting in what I've read of the, of people who break away from ultra-Orthodoxy, right? That when they break, they don't tend to become conservative Jews or Reform Jews. They realize that God is not going to strike them dead and that they can do whatever they want. And then they go ahead and do it. However, that I think, is a misreading of religion. Religion is not about what God is going to strike you down for. Religion is how God is going to try to elevate your life. And that if you don't do the mitzvot, you miss out on those opportunities. You may have a great life and you may have a great spiritual life. Maybe you find it in a different way, but you don't necessarily find it in the Jewish way. And so you miss out on the component of being part of a community of people who do all of that together.
Rabbi,
Okay.
can I ask a quick question on that
Yes,
topic?
Daniel.
Do you need to end?
Well,
Let me ask the question and maybe you can pick it up later or we can talk about it later. I have noticed exactly what you're saying, and I think it's fascinating that people who stop being Orthodox or ultra-Orthodox typically they don't move to the left. They kind of give up on the whole picture, or they go to almost secular. And I often wonder why it is. You've given a very good explanation. Is that something that you have researched, or have you talked to people? Is that what they've told you?
No, it's just, I've read a number of accounts from people who left ultra-Orthodoxy. It's just, it's not universal, but my observation is that it's more common than not. And very often that's one of the reasons they have to break away, because if that's what God is, how can you satisfy God? You're paralyzed. Oh yeah, obviously there are a lot of people in the ultra-Orthodox world who don't think like that. But many of those who do, when they break away, man, they're gone.
Well, that part seems very, very true to me. All the books you read, the articles in the New Yorker and whatever, they don't talk about people becoming conservative or reform.
Yeah, and it's interesting. The New Yorker and certain other magazines, not to be mentioned, they will, they love to tell stories about somebody who broke away from religion. I don't know, but I get the impression that they're not as interested in printing stories about people who found strength, who found faith and meaning in traditional forms of religion. And I think that, it's not to say that, those magazines are all wrong and 0% right. It's just that in our culture, we tend to miss out on the in-between, and we interpret many things going by the extremes. And I think that's a temptation that we need to be careful against. Okay, thank you all very much for coming tonight.
Thank you very much, Rabbi. Good class.
Shabbat
you,
shalom.
Rabbi.
We'll see you again next week. Ashley, thank you for holding down the fort.
Thank you, Ashley.
Thank you, Ashley.
Thank you, Rabbi.
All right.
Thank you.
night.
Thank you, Rabbi. Great class.
Bye. Thank
Thank you.
you.
Thank you, Fanny.